Hello everyone and welcome back to the semifinals of the World Fischer Random Championship. We've already covered the games between Magnus and Fabiano. Carlsen proceeds to the finals, and one of these two gentlemen will be his opponent. So here's a game. It's from the rapid section. This is the second game of the rapids, and it's it's just a real roller coaster. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Without further ado, let's check it out. It's the same position we've covered both games, both of the rapid games between Carlsen and Caruana. You know, the one where it's very easy to develop your bishops. So let's see how Wesley and the Nepo do it. We have b3 already developing, well, not developing, but opening up the dark square bishop. We have b6, Nepo does the same. We have c4 and knight to c6. E3, and already on move 3 Nepo plays twice with the knight. So what's the idea? The idea is that it's not all that easy to kick it away. You don't, I mean, you haven't played this position ever, so you don't know if A3 is a useful move. You don't want to spend all that much time on A3. On the other hand, if you play something like this, you might even get checkmated. Knight to D3 is mate. So there are some dangers. If you don't want to waste a move to kick it away, you have to be careful. So Wesley plays bishop to c3, just threatens to remove it, and now e6. The queen guards the knight on b4. We have queen to e2, and now g5. There is really no merit to knight to c2 check, because the king will just move to f1, and then the knight will you're just gonna have to go back to b4. You don't really have any useful ideas over there. So g5, opening up the dark square bishop now. Bishop captures on h8, rook captures, and here Wesley castles. We have rook back to g8 by Nepo, and now knight to c3. Continuing development, we have g4 and g3 now. We have bishop captures on h1, trading off all of the bishops, but it is something that you might have expected, as all of the bishops are eyeing each other from the start of the game. So king captures on h1 and now h5. So here Nepo is preparing h4, maybe capturing, and it's interesting why he moved the rook over to g8. Why not leave the rook to h8? But I'm sure there was a good reason. d4, Wesley continues development, expands in the center, and now h4. We have d5 by Wesley. He says your attack on the king side doesn't really do anything. We have queen to h6 and e4 now. We have knight to d6 and a3, kicking the knight back. We have knight to a6 and here b4. Just slowly developing on the queen side, saying that this is a weird knight here. This guy here also not doing all that great. So if your attack on the king side doesn't work out, you're gonna have some problems. So rook to h8, now Nepo brings the rook back to the h8 square from where it came from, and then now rook to d4. Here, if you capture on g4, Wesley could go for this, but then after captures and captures, you're gonna get queenside castles. This rook is now coming to g8. Also, the c4 pawn is a weakness, so not something Wesley wants to do. He first plays rook to d4. He guards the c4 pawn, so now the queen is able to capture on g4, but c5. Nepo says, okay, either ruin your pawn structure or get that rook away from there. So Wesley decides to capture. D captures on c6 en passant. D captures, and now rook f to d1. Nicely doubling up on the d file, preparing rook captures on d6. So h captures on g3, now threatening mate, and now f captures on g3. It's very important that the queen is covering the h2 square, and you don't have a way of deflecting the queen, at least not for the moment. So king e7, you need to defend the knight twice. Knight to b3 now. We have c5, rook back to d2, and now c captures on b4. We have a captures on b4, and the knight captures on b4. Knight to d4 by Wesley. Now already, it's an excellent square for the knight. This knight has to be careful. You don't want to allow knight to c6 check. Also, there might be some ideas with the knight to f5 check. Not for the moment, but if such a position arises. So with a5 by Nepo, he has a pass pawn, so he starts pushing it, and now you can't go knight f5 just yet. Yes, it's a check, you fork the queen, but black will not capture with the pawn, black will capture with the knight, and then you just don't really have anything. E captures, so you're gonna trade one of the rooks and then get the other rook over to d8, and you've just helped black consolidate his position. So here Wesley plays the very interesting knight cb5. threatens to capture here, and now basically deflecting this knight. So we have knight captures on b5 by Nepo, and now knight to f5. So now you have to capture with a pawn, otherwise you're going to lose the queen. We have e captures on f5, e captures on f5 with check, opening up a discovery here, king to f6, and now rook captures on d8. We have rook captures and rook captures on d8. So here, Wesley has a rook for 2 knights, so Nepo is definitely better here. I mean, better material-wise. He has 2 knights for a rook, and he has a passed a-pawn. The problem is his king. It's a very loose king, and you have to be very careful what you do. Here, queen to c1 check by Nepo, king to g2, and now knight back to c6, forcing the rook to move away. Rook to d7, and now knight b to d4. Now the knights are nicely protected, and the queen is under attack here. But as usual, 2 knights guarding each other, that's it's almost always an issue. So rook to d6 check by Wesley, pushing the king back, and here's where it gets really interesting. Here Nepo was extremely low on time, and he has to go king to g5. He should use the f-pawn as a shield. He shouldn't capture it. For example, king g5, and now white doesn't really have a good way of continuing this attack. The best white has is queen to f2, so it threatens just to pick up the knight, and then win the 2 knights for a rook. But here black has a4. That's the point. You have to start pushing your pass pawn. And here, after everything gets traded, captures, you will go queen to c2 check, king g1, now queen b1 check, king goes back if you go to g2, then you can just repeat and start pushing your pawn, or if you go somewhere like king to f2, then you can even pick up this pawn with check, and now it's a queen and pawn endgame where black is up a pawn, but it's a very, very strong passed a-pawn. So this is the best for Nepo, king to g5. However, he played king captures on f5, and now Wesley goes rook to d5 check. Otherwise, if the f-pawn was still here, if the king was on g5, black could have used the f5 pawn as a shield. But okay, king f6, we have rook to d6 check, king to g5, and now queen to f2. With a similar idea, you just want to give up the rook for 2 knights. So knight to f3. Getting the knight into the attack, hoping for rook captures on c6, and then queen to e1 with check. King to h1 you have to move, and now knight to d3, discovered check. Also the queen is under attack. You have to go queen g1, and now knight to f2 check. King to g2, and now queen to e3, but this is very hard stuff to find, especially when you're very low on the clock. Now you don't have anything better than to capture the knight. Queen e4 check, and then you pick up the rook, and you enter the similar endgame where you are up a passed a-pawn. But after knight to f3, Wesley plays h4 with check. We have g captures on h3, and now with check, and king captures on f3. Wesley grabs the knight, but his king is now in a very delicate position. And here, again, it's impossible to find the correct move here with very little time on the clock. For example, you can't go queen a3 check to pick up the rook, because queen e3 check blocks check and also delivers check. So here you would have to trade, captures, and now push a4. Of course, black is better here. So that's something you could play, but there are better moves. For example, f5, and white doesn't have a good move here. The pawn really restricts the movement of the white king. You cannot go back to g2, and it's just a very tough position for white. You don't have a better move than queen to e3 check, and then well, you basically end up in a similar endgame. But here Nepo played h2 instead, and it makes sense. You're threatening pawn to h1. This will bring another queen into the game, so it looks perfect. The problem is, of course, if white captures, then queen a3 check does pick up the rook, but a pawn to h2 allows Wesley rook d5 check. And now the problem is, you will not have queen a3 check followed by queen captures rook, because the rook is now on d5. So we have f5 by Nepo, and now Wesley just captures the h2 pawn, because there's no check to pick up the rook. So we have knight to d4 check. Nepo again tries to give up the knight for queen c3 check, followed by queen captures rook, but now comes king to g2. We have queen to d2 check, king to h3, and now queen back to e3. We have queen to b2 now with a double attack on the knight on d4, and now knight to e6. And here rook to e5, attacking the queen. So what do you play here? Here, best for Nepo is knight to f4 check. There's no better move than this one. After the king moves, king h2. Now you trade like this, knight d3, attack the queen and the rook, and you force a trade like this, captures, captures, and this is a good endgame for you. You're still up a pawn, you're threatening to pick up the c4 pawn. If rook b3, you can just pick it up and defend your pawn. Black can definitely play this. However, Nepo, low on time, played queen to d4, and now it's a bit different because Wesley captures, we have queen captures, knight captures, and rook to d5. This move makes all the difference in the world. Because now the knight has to move. After knight to c2, we have c5, and the nice pawn chain on the queen side is broken. So you don't have an option of advancing, because then just the c pawn is too fast. So captures, captures. Now the knight and the pawn are under attack. Knight to e3, and now rook captures on a5. So instead of all of those opportunities where you could go into an endgame, even though you're down the exchange, being up a pawn and a very strong passed a pawn, here it's equal pawns, so 1 pawn each, but it's a rook against a knight. We have knight to g4 now, king to g2, and now knight to f6. So of course Wesley has more time on the clock, so he will try to push this for a win. We have king to f3, knight to g4, rook to b5, and now knight back to f6. We have rook to b8, king to g6, and now king to f4. Slowly but surely making progress with the king. Knight h5 check. We have king back to f3, and now king to f6. Rook to b5, putting pressure on the pawn here. King back to g6, and now king to g2. Now the king will try to find a way via the h file. We have knight back to f6, king to h3, knight to g4, and now king to h4. So it will not be easy to kick the white king away from there. King f6, now rook b6 check. King to e5, and now king to g5, now threatening check to just pick up the f5 pawn. So knight to e3, guarding the pawn here, but a rook to f6 now, putting black in sort of a zugzwang. So what do you play here? King to e4 was played, but it was also on this move, it was move 60 that Ian Nepomniachtchi resigned the game. Because white has a really forced winning sequence, and he had like 2 seconds on the clock when he resigned, so he was mostly playing on increment. But feel free to pause the video here and try to find this very nice forced sequence, since it immediately wins the game. Well, I give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding such a nice forcing sequence. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's of course rook e6 check. I know it's kind of lame when the solution starts with check, but we show what we have. So rook e6 check. It doesn't really matter where the king goes. King anywhere. Now you pick up the knight. That's the point. King captures on f5, and now your pawn will just queen and win the game. King here. The pawn is protected, and that's it. So yeah, after king to e4, Nepo resigns, and an excellent victory for Wesley So. And in the third game of the Rapids, they drew the game, and Nepo had to win. Nepo had to win all the games to reach the blitz section. Otherwise, Wesley just has too many points, and they will not be going into blitz section. Much like Carlsen and Caruana did not go into blitz section, because Carlsen won 12.5 to 7.5, whereas Wesley takes the win with 13 to 7. So Wesley will face Magnus in the finals of the World Fischer Random Championship, so it will be very interesting to see. Wesley's been playing amazing chess. He won 7 matches, I believe it's 6 or 7 matches after Nepo to reach the finals, whereas Magnus, he automatically qualified into the semifinals by being sort of the unofficial World Fischer Random Championship, because he defeated Hikaru Nakamura in the match they had last year. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Nicolas Ionescu, Alan Kolink, and Julian Yusufzadeh for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the finals of the World Fischer Random Championship, checking up on the European Team Championship, and of course on your wonderful suggestions. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.